Welcome to Psychoanalysis for Managers Part 2. Let's recap what we had learned in Part 1. In Part 1, we had learned about psychoanalysis and its three elements. We had looked at ego defense mechanisms, the different types of ego defense mechanisms, and the 5 stages of psychosexual development. In Part 2, we will be learning about different personality styles and will learn more about them. We will also look at the topic of authority from the psychological dimension. Personality styles. The identification of different personality styles and the range of behavior associated with each is often an additional input for the correct diagnosis of human problems in an organization. However, personality styles rarely occur in their pure, unadulterated form, and great caution and skill need to be exercised before any such assessments are made. Some of the main personality styles are described in the following slides. The first is the paranoid style. The chief characteristic of this style is suspicious thinking. Such a person always looks for some hidden clue in the remarks of another person. His search is for the real meaning of those remarks or actions which confirms his preconceived notions. He pays attention to those aspects that lead to a confirmation of his original idea. His general reaction towards authority is defensive, authority being a threat. Such a person, on making a mistake, will search the face of his superior for signs of dislike and disapproval, and even a harmless expression may get transformed and disliked into a conviction like, "He dislikes me, he has always disliked me." The second style that we will look at is the obsessive-compulsive style. The main characteristic of this style is rigidity, which may manifest itself in a stiff body posture or a stilted social manner, but above all it refers to an intellectual rigidity. The compulsive usually pays attention to technical details. They also display an inability to pay attention. This means that their attention is narrowly focused and nothing distracts them from their single-mindedness. This brings us to another aspect of the compulsive style, that is ritualized behavior. This ritualism manifests itself in such activities like the constant washing and rewashing of hands, touching only certain things when entering offices, etc. Another feature common to them is their harsh superego. They constantly live under pressures of self-made deadlines and a host of "I should" and "I should nots." Their great fear lying in a threatened loss of self-control. Their reaction towards authority is usually that of an ambivalent submission. The third and the last style that we will look at is the hysterical style. The predominant feature of this style is impersonation. In answer to questions, these persons don't give facts but offer impressions. These impressions may be vivid and interesting but are never detailed or defined. For example, on being asked to describe the characteristics of his superior, such a person may fumble for some time and then say, "He's wonderful, that's all, just wonderful." They have an incapacity for concentration, solving of problems, being done more often by hunches or guesses than by application of logic. They are also very suggestive and easily influenced by opinions of others. Emotional outbursts in such people are quite common. The chief defense mechanism associated with this style is repression. Now, let's look at the topic of authority from the psychological dimension. Some of the basic problems that arise in an authority relationship in an organization stem from the fact that both the superior and subordinate do not enter the organization as blank unmarked sheets, but they bring with them their past histories, especially their childhood experiences of authority relationships. The dilemma of authority in childhood lies in the fact that authority figures also monopolize the child's varied emotional responses. These early responses towards parents or siblings are often transferred to superiors in work settings. Transference reaction, however, is not just the attribution of characteristics of a parent or sibling to a superior, but it's an unconscious attempt on the subordinate's part to re-establish and relive an infantile situation much longed for because it was once either greatly enjoyed or greatly missed. The part of personality which has the greatest influence on a person's behavior in an authority relationship is the superego. The perception of external authority is often greatly influenced by the superego which the person has created within himself. While the superego owes its existence to an internalization of authority, this existence is constantly reinforced by a projection of superego upon the representatives of authority. The latter become endowed with the qualities of the superego, its morality, wisdom, strength, in a manner which can be quite independent of the realities of the case. In short, one can maintain that the analysis of the specific authority relationship can never be complete without some awareness of the personality factors that have a bearing on the relationship. To conclude, as a therapy, psychoanalysis is based on self-knowledge rather than faith, commitment, and healing. Therefore, it is not capable of providing miracle cures or instantly eliminating corporate malaise. It has no ultimate message to deliver, nor any final reconciliation of the many conflicts and tensions which make up life both inside and outside organizations. What it can do is to help dissolve some of the illusions which individuals, groups, and organizations espouse, and in doing, overcome some of the avoidable pain and suffering which reside therein. It is our contention that organizations that are psychoanalytically informed, and specifically managers in these organizations, gain insight into the influences and consequences of organizational structures and processes. Moreover, they may also gain a deeper appreciation of reform and practices that are conducive to good psychological health for all that inhabit our organizations.